Hi, I'm Adam Sheridan, Global Head of Products and Analytics at Ipsos Creative Excellence, and welcome to this avant-premiere of Misfits, an Ipsos book that provides robust evidence for creativity in advertising and how it can spark brand growth. This book and the evidence in its pages is much needed in the advertising industry, an industry that needs more reassurance and confidence to harness creativity. With the Cannes Lions State of Creativity report confirming that only 12% of brand leaders feel confident they can convince CFOs to invest in high quality creative work. So why is there this lack of confidence to pursue creativity in advertising? And what can we do to even better support the case for its use? Let's review some of the key issues and evidence I present in Misfits to further make this case for creativity. Before we get to advertising, though, we need to start with people. Evidence in cognitive and evolutionary psychology consistently suggests that we're pre-wired to favour the safe and familiar. Our brains are prediction machines, referencing past experiences to maximise positive outcomes in the present and the future, even if those choices are more mediocre outcomes than very good ones. And we see clear evidence of a cultivation of conformity in our society. From birth, our lives are mapped out into a predetermined sequence of events that focus on a uniform, standardized outcome in the next test or the next scorecard. And what this means is that from an early age, we learn to conform, we learn to fit in. And this continues into the corporate world, with studies identifying that while company executives agree creativity is important, they are more likely to reject creative ideas they hadn't seen before. And this tendency to conform, to minimize risk, carries through into advertising, with many campaigns gravitating to safe and familiar category codes, the sleek lines on a model in auto advertising, the winding roads and beautiful scenery that the car drives down, the beautiful people in the cars, the zooming in on technical and functional features. And in beer advertising, we can see typical category codes, the condensation on the beer bottle, the pouring of the beer into the glass, the promise of refreshment. All very familiar, but converging to near identikit advertising and really lacking a reflection of the people the brands need to appeal to be chosen more frequently and to grow market share. Another problem I identify in the book is that the evidence we have so far about the value of creativity to business effects is not as generalizable as we would like, that it tends to be focused on comparing award entrants to winners. And this represents a very small proportion of advertising. And while creative awards are critical to the industry to showcase and inspire the best work, we can only assume that entrants have had a lot of time and resources put into them, and that they probably had creativity in mind. So that comparison may not be the full story. And a third problem I identify in the book is a lack of shared language in what creativity really means in advertising. And if we can't talk about creativity with a shared language, how can we hope to use it to get to more effective advertising? And if we look to the thought leaders and respected figureheads in advertising, we see a range of words and phrases that are used to describe creativity. And they fall into two general trends. One that's near confrontational, nearly daring brand managers to pursue creativity. One of chaos, disturbing, breaking things, and nearly subversive. And another trend is more nuanced, thinking about good taste, balance, sincerity, and meaning. And while there are different opinions and different trends in what creativity is considered to be in advertising, an observation I note in the book is that rarely do these definitions take the viewpoint of regular people. The most important people in advertising, the people whose behaviour advertising is tasked to influence, but who think very little about brands and advertising. And with these three barriers to adopting creativity, I set out to understand how we can use advertising effects data from samples of regular people to better represent its value to end brand growth. And I'm pleased to share some highlights with you of that today. So let's start with how regular people describe creativity in advertising. What can we learn from this? Well, to understand what creativity means to regular people, we asked them to simply describe to us via open-ended survey responses how they would describe creative advertising they've seen. The visualization on screen represents the key themes that came through from the 20,000 people we sampled, and their responses were diverse and illuminating. We clearly see a recognition for originality and difference on the right in blue, though this is also accompanied by other experiences, such as having fun and being entertained, that it was generally interesting to them, that they had a feeling of joy and happiness represented by the yellow responses, and an appreciation for the production quality represented by the green responses. And this led me to consider a people-first definition of creativity, which is on screen, an original or different experience that is valued by the end audience. And the value can come in different forms, in simple fun and entertainment, or finding the experience interesting or useful. Now, this doesn't mean that advertising outside this definition can't be considered to be creative, but having this people-first definition acted as a framework for me to better understand how at all, if creativity can contribute to a positive experience for audiences and also to contribute to end brand growth. So if originality, difference, and value is important to people, what can we learn outside of advertising to better understand why this might be the case? Here I look to the misfits of the world, the people who actively don't fit in to deliver more value to their end audience. I profile several across different parts of popular culture, from movies, music, and video games. And I find an interesting trend and reference point that truly successful experiences, those that people are willing to pay for, more often than not, connect to originality and value in some form. On screen, we have an example of the work of Shigeru Miyamoto, creative fellow of Nintendo and designer of the Legend of Zelda games. These games are successful for Nintendo, but some are more successful than others. When we classify these games as simply repeating a familiar gaming experience and compare them to those that introduce new and genuinely original elements to the experience, such as time travel, a first 3D open world experience, a new anime style, or a more expansive and endurance-driven experience, more often than not, these games sell more than the preceding game. And with this reference point from people and culture about elements of creativity, of delivering an original, entertaining, interesting, or useful experience, I then explore how these elements connect to advertising effects. And to do this, we took a two-step approach. The first was to run a factor analysis on our measures of the advertising experience amongst a selection of 1,700 recently evaluated ads across 18 countries. The factor analysis grouped these different experiences in terms of which naturally occur together. And this was an interesting exercise because it allowed us to understand where, if at all, creativity naturally emerges in the advertising experience of regular people, rather than me as a practitioner defining that from a top-down perspective. And the analysis identified three overall advertising experiences. A creative experience, one that the audience thinks is unique, surprising, entertaining, and talkable. Creative ideas was the second, an experience where the audience has learned something new and connected to this considers the advertised brand to be different from others. And finally, we identified empathy and fitting in. This is an experience that doesn't really link to the definition of creativity we propose. And it's, if anything, more about fitting in. And importantly, it's a feeling that the advertising has been designed with the audience in mind, that it's taken more of a people than a product-first approach. And with these three advertising experiences in hand, we related them to our sales-validated effects metrics in our creative evaluation solution, Creative Spark, with a general linear regression model to understand which experience explain the most variance for each metric. So let's now turn to some of the highlights of what we discovered. The key goal for advertising is to be encoded in the mind. We really need to consider this to be the price of admission. If the advertising isn't encoded in the mind, it's unlikely to have the opportunity to influence behaviour at a later date of choice or consumption. And what we found is clear evidence that a creative experience is most important to increasing the likelihood that advertising will be encoded in the mind. And I consider that this signals the need for brands and agencies to think more about the value of entertainment, to pay this price of admission. Paul Feldwick talks about this value of entertainment in his publications, that he describes as the value of a performance. And I think we see clear evidence of this from a generalizable sample of thousands of ads. I profile a number of campaigns in the book that leverage this creative experience. And the one on screen is for Heineken, for James Bond. In the ad, we see Daniel Craig, the actor, being consistently mistaken for his character of James Bond while he's on holiday, and he struggles to meet this idea of Bond in real life. I think we have to ask a question here. Is this advertising or is it entertainment? I would submit to you that it's actually both, and this is somewhat the point, and a signal of the evidence of the value of creativity in advertising to end brand growth. Another finding that emerged from the analysis is that a combination of creativity and empathy has the strongest relationship with end advertising effects. With advertising that entertains, that shows something new, and has empathy for the audience, reflecting their world, their dreams, their challenges, having a 20% stronger performance than average, whereas advertising that does one or the other, it regresses more to the mean, more to mediocrity. And this is a key observation I expand on in the book, that creativity is not the preserve of difference and originality alone, that it's the connection between the extra and the ordinary that matters. And that when utilised well, it delivers that original or different experience of value that is framed in the world of the target audience. One ad I highlight in the book is for Volvo, and it takes a very different, more human approach than the examples I referred to earlier, where we can see the story focused mainly on the people that Volvo wants to appeal to, in this case, new parents. And the car is an enabler of them having a better life. And in this case, it literally helps to save their lives. And it's in this sense that we see creativity represented at its best, as a mindset and a craft to entertain and connect the extra to the ordinary by having empathy for people to represent the very human experience the brand can help to deliver. I'd like to thank you for your time today, and I hope the people on this video conference who make or green light advertising, even based on these highlights alone, can now have more confidence to make their case for creativity and to also have the mindset to focus on one thing, and that's your audience. To actively create advertising that surprises, that entertains, and is born of empathy for people, reflecting their challenges, their needs, their dreams. Because the evidence confirms advertising that delivers this experience is not only more positive for audiences, but it's also more likely to deliver an increase in sales and market share growth. So thank you again for your time. I've been asked to remind everyone viewing this recording that there'll be the Q&A later. So please do come back to that if you have any questions for me or the other speakers, and we look forward to speaking with you then. Thank you very much.